Welcome to Family History Mysteries, a podcast that tells the stories uncovered through family history research, the unexpected stories of everyday people. I am an avid family historian who has been compiling my family tree for over 15 years, with nearly 20,000 people recorded in my trees.
Episode 113. James Lowe. James Lowe's family have passed a story down saying that he enlisted in World War I without his father's consent, and from that time on his father Isaac refused to talk to him. This is the Lowe's family story. James's father, Isaac Lowe, was born in 1847 in Walton, Derbyshire, England. On the 25th of May 1875, he married Emma Mellor in Lancashire at St Peter's. Isaac was a farmer at the time of their marriage, and he was from the parish of Condon in Derbyshire, and Emma was a spinster of Halliwell. It's stated that Isaac's father was James Lowe, a farmer, and Emma's father was Joseph Mellor, who was an overlooker. Isaac had a 216-acre farm called Whitbreading Farm in Kirklington, Nottinghamshire in 1881. Emma died on the 28th of August 1885 at Kirklington, aged only 41. Isaac then married Mary Ann Blythe, known as Marion, in England on the 28th of April 1887. Marion was 6 years younger than Isaac. By the end of 1887, they emigrated to Australia. Their firstborn son, James, was born in Carlton in Victoria in 1887. Then Jack followed in 1890. Ike, who was born and died in 1891, and Leighton in 1894 in Mildura. And there was a story referring to Isaac Lowe, said Mr. Lowe arrived in Melbourne from England when he was 40 years of age. He went to Mildura and was the third settler to take up land in Mildura for a fruit orchard. While in Mildura, he was employed by the Chaffey brothers as foreman in charge of clearing operations, and at one time had 14 traction engines and 200 men under him. He spent several years in Mildura and did not leave there until the Chaffeys went bankrupt. Then he came to Western Australia in search of a home in 1896. At Serpentine, he undertook a draining contract for Mr. A.K. Richardson, who was then the Minister for Lands. He returned to Mildura within 6 months and brought the rest of the family across, and in 1898 he purchased land in Harvey. So there is a record of when he was in Mildura in 1890. So on the 27th of February 1890 at the Mildura Police Court, William Jordan, an engine driver recently employed on the clearing gang, was summoned by Isaac Lowe, the foreman, for assault and obscene language. From the evidence, it appeared that the defendant was at work and the foreman gave him instructions, and then he became abusive and combative. He jumped down off his engine and invited Mr. Lowe out to a war dance using certain very improper expressions at the same time. Mr. Lowe pointed out that it was not his duty to fight, and Jordan gave him a push on the shoulder. Some of the men employed on the gang were called as witnesses in support of the charge. The defendant denied the obscene language and affirmed that the assault complained of was accidental through his stumbling while getting down from the engine. The bench held that both charges had been proved for the obscene language, and he was imposed a 10-shilling fine with 5 shillings cost and 20 shillings with 5 shilling costs for the assault. Only a few months later, there was another article with issues related to his job as a foreman. In the Mildura Cultivator on the 26th of June 1890, Isaac Lowe, on being called and sworn, deposed he was the foreman of the clearing gangs for Chaffey Brothers Limited. He was at work at Lot 20, Section 19, and during the morning a number of men on strike passed by the place where his gang was engaged. They groaned and boo-hooed, but he took no heed of them beyond noticing that one of them was a man named Toohey. In the afternoon at about 3 or 4 o'clock, the men came back. They were evidently under the influence of liquor. 2 of them were Hart and Burke. After some words had been exchanged, Burke struck him in the mouth and Hart followed suit. He tried to get out of their way and they followed him around to the traction engine. Burke seized a heavy bludgeon and chased him. He ran away and got behind a mallee tree, and then, on Burke coming up, he sprang upon him and threw him. He then got back to the engine and asked the members of his gang whether they were going to see him hunted about like a dog. They said they could do nothing. His assailants, however, then went away. Each man would be required to pay a fine of £10 or in default go to jail for 3 months. In the case of Tui, he had not actually struck a blow and he would be let off somewhat lighter. He would be punished by a fine of £7 or 2 months imprisonment. And then on the 24th of September 1890, it says the steam traction engine Savage has had a rather novel duty imposed on it for several days past. This has been the removal intact of Mr. Isaac Lowe's house from Cowra Avenue to Walnut Avenue. The residence is a galvanised corrugated iron one, 28 foot by 18 foot, and the distance it had to be shifted somewhat exceeds 2 miles. As a preliminary to its starting, a strong red gum frame was placed under the house, and this served as a skid or sledge for the building. Not an article of furniture was removed from the position it held in the house, and Mrs. Lowe and her family seem to have had little to do before starting other than take down the outdoor clothesline. Even the fireplace and oven in place travel with the structure. Residents in Mildura recalled Isaac Lowe's house at Walnut Avenue and described it as conspicuous and familiar. It stood on a little knoll that sloped down to 12th Street. It said that although Mr. Lowe did a lot of hard work there, he met with little success and gave it up and went to Western Australia. So in the Southern Times on the 23rd of January 1904, there was an article where the reporter went out and visited the Lowe's orchard at Harvey that they had established once they moved to Western Australia. When I called on Mr. I. Lowe, he was in company with 2 of his boys bagging potatoes from a patch in close proximity to his passion vine-covered residence, which he'd called Wayne Groves, and which is situated on the eastern side of the railway, about 2 miles from the station. Although Wayne Groves literally boasts of a river at the back door, with clustering evergreens whose kindly shade may be likened to the shadow of a great rock in a weary land, the sturdy yeoman owner informs you that on it must not rely the whole year through, and so has tapped a permanent supply at deeper depths than the riverbed. During a short conversation, Mr. Lowe informed me that he had been a resident of Harvey and he had come from Mildura to Western Australia, and so far felt that in making the change he'd done so wisely. The property consists of 80 acres cut up into convenient blocks, some that are utilised for stock purposes whenever it is found necessary or deemed prudent to keep the said stock at home. Of the total acres mentioned, Mr. Lowe has 18 absolutely cleared, on which he has 5 acres planted under apricots and 3 of mixed fruits. It is to be regretted that the former have not done anything better than give promise of a return for the money, time and attention they have cost. In appearance, the majority of the trees presented a thoroughly healthy appearance, but when it is mentioned that the youngest scion of the House of Lowe has not so far achieved a solitary stomachache from the fruit grown thereon, their fruitlessness will be understood by those who have been boys. Mr. Lowe has not, however, lost all hope of yet getting a return commensurate with the labour bestowed upon him. The owner of Wayne Groves harvested 6 acres of wheat and 10 acres of self-sown oats, which makes quite a tidy stack awaiting the coming of the chaff cutter. To those who know the district, the difficulty in subduing the heavily timbered lands is at once apparent. Mr. Lowe finds it compulsory to hasten slowly, as his services are constantly in demand away from home, and the season's return so far do not justify an endeavour to do all at once. Something, however, has been done on all the property. First of all, the blackboy trees have been grubbed, and on half the property, burned, stinkweed has been eradicated, and the smaller trees grubbed. After the fires go through this year, ring barking will be completed. There are only about 8 acres remaining to be done, and attention paid to where attention is most of all required. Mr. Lowe's farming experience is a blend of English and colonial, inasmuch as he first became acquainted with the methods of the farmer in Derbyshire, which county he left 17 years ago for Victoria, in which state he ultimately settled in Mildura and saw its good and bad times for 8 years, when he indicated that he heard the West a calling. Mrs. Lowe presides over the affairs domestic, with Miss Lowe as chief of staff, and when one thinks of harvesters, who require about twice as many meals as a miner in a day, to attend to, cows to milk, butter to be made, pigs to feed, eggs to gather, fowls to get a profit out of, and then finds himself suddenly on a flower garden, where flowers like perfumed lights delight the eye, he thanks his host and hostess for the happiness of a day. And then in 1921, It is recorded that Marion, on the 9th of January, at St Clair's Hospital in Bunbury, had passed away at the age of 68 years. And Isaac lived on until the 29th of December 1932. And it's interesting, at the time that he passed away, when the obituary was written, it said that he brought the apricots from Mildura that he raised in his nursery and planted them. And it says, today the property is considered the finest apricot orchard in Australia. And that's because he left them and didn't prune them whatsoever. And he actually got a yield from not pruning them at all, which was totally opposite of what the standard is. And it says the late Mr. Lowe took a keen interest in public movements and was one of the chief movers in obtaining a school for Harvey. He was interested in the Farmers Club and the Citrus Society, the forerunner of the Agricultural Society, and took first prize for Washington Navels at the first citrus show. For years before the war, he was in charge of 200 acres of orchards belonging to absentee owners. Mr. Lowe would have been 86 in a few weeks. In his death notice, it does say that he is mourned by Mrs. Leach of Baranyub, his daughter, and his two sons, Jack and Leighton of Harvey. And then it does mention another son, James, was killed in Gallipoli. He was sergeant in the 11th Battalion. A great deal of sympathy was expressed among the residents of Harvey. So, as mentioned, their firstborn child was a daughter. Her name was Mary Lowe. She was known as Polly, and she was born in Eastwood, Nottinghamshire, England, on the 8th of May, 1877. So her mother was Emma Mellor, Isaac's first wife, and Mary married Colin Campbell Leach, a Scotsman, on the 8th of September 1909 at St John's Church in Pinjarra, Western Australia. Colin was 6 years older than Mary. Colin worked for a time in Isaac's orchard and was held in high regard by the family until he wanted to marry Mary. He found strong disapproval from Mary's father Isaac and Mary's brother Leighton. Isaac expected Mary to be around to look after him in his old age. It was Marion, Isaac's second wife, who told Mary to go and enjoy a life of her own, and she took her stepmother's advice. Isaac and Leighton made it very uncomfortable for them to stay in Harvey, so by 1925 Mary and Colin left and settled at Burracup, where Colin farmed. Their first child, Irene, was born in 1910, and they went on to have 6 more children. It took many years for Isaac to come to terms with Mary defying his authority, even though she was 32 years old when she married. Without Marion's support, she probably would never have left. Mary said her stepmother was the best friend she could ever have had. Her husband died in 1934 at the age of 63, and Mary died in 1967 at the age of 90. James, the second child, known as Jim, was born in 1887. He was known to be a champion horseman and worked as a chaff cutter. He was known to be steadfast, conscientious and principled. When he enlisted in World War I in September 1914, he was working as an engine driver in Victoria. And as mentioned, Isaac was against his son enlisting, and as he disobeyed his father's wishes, Isaac refused to speak to James from that day on. James trained for the forces. He was promoted to sergeant before even sailing to the front. And on the 2nd of November 1914, he sailed on the Istanias to Egypt in the 11th Battalion. His training continued in preparation for the landing at Gallipoli in Egypt. And at 4:30 a.m. on the 25th of April 1915, the 11th Battalion landed on Gallipoli under heavy rifle and machine gun fire. As they reached the beach, the men stormed up the steep hills to push the Turks back, resulting in a disorganised and confused line. Over the following days, the 11th Battalion started to reorganise and established a stronger line of defence. On the 2nd of May 1915, a party of men from the 11th Battalion climbed up the steep hill described as a slope that could easily pass for a cliff, and Private R. Charman described what happened on that day. Our chaps were all sitting down just under the brow of the hill resting, and a few were peeping over the top now and again, keeping watch on the Turks' movements. One of them drew Jim's attention to 2 Turks about 300 yards off. Jim got a bit excited and got his rifle to have a shot at them, when a sniper must have seen him and got in the first shot. It hit him in the forehead, passing clean through his head. He fell straight back, tumbling over and over, falling 50 feet or more before stopping. Death must have been instantaneous. Charman reported that Private Jim Lowe was buried near where he fell. The proceeds of his will, £191, went to his brother Jack. Jim Lowe was only 27 years old. His brother Jack was born in Mildura in 1890, and Jack was mentioned as obtaining a prize in the 10th annual citrus show at Harvey in the exhibition on the 24th of September 1914. Interestingly, Jack Lowe enlisted in World War I on the 12th of February 1917, and his father Isaac was listed as his next of kin. He had been knocked back for service in 1916 due to a dislocated shoulder. He was nearly 27 when he enlisted in the 37th Reinforcements. So Jack disembarked for Egypt on the 9th of November 1917, and he served as a gunner in France in 1918. He was discharged on the 20th of August 1919. Jack returned to Harvey in 1919 and took up his former role as the management of the firm Hayward and Son Limited, where he was a popular and genial manager. On the 16th of January 1920, it was announced the engagement of Miss Emily Trigwell of Boyanup and Mr. Jack Lowe, late AIF of Harvey, and he married Emily in August 1920. And it was recorded in the paper. A very pretty wedding was solemnised at St George's Church, Boyanup, when Miss Emily Trigwell, daughter of Mr. A.E. Trigwell, was married to Mr. Jack Lowe, son of Mr. and Mrs. Isaac Lowe of Harvey. The bride is held in the highest esteem by the whole neighbourhood of Boyanup, whilst the bridegroom, through a lifetime spent in Harvey and his association with T. Hayward and Sons Limited as branch manager at Harvey, is widely known and respected in the district. Consequently, a large number of relatives and friends assembled to extend their best wishes and congratulations to the couple. And it mentions that his brother Leighton Lowe acted as best man. At the time of his marriage, Jack built a home in Harvey, which is now heritage listed. They had two sons, James Thomas in February 1922 and Peter Blythe, born in 1927. Peter married and had three sons. However, James, no doubt his uncle's namesake, died in Germany in World War II in December 1944 in the RAAF. James was a bank clerk working at the Bank of New South Wales at Wagon, Western Australia, at the time of his enlistment. Jack Lowe was an active member of the Harvey community. He was president of the Harvey Agricultural Society and the Harvey Road Board. The family established Lowe's Harvey stores in Uduck Road, and the property continues to be held by the Lowe family. In July 1932, Jack Lowe is mentioned as the managing director of Lowe's Harvey Stores Limited, and it says that his activities as chairman of the Roads Board needs little commendation, and as a mark of respect to the memory of a worthy pioneer and to the father of a citizen who is worthy of upholding the tradition of a name which will figure prominently in the archives of the district, Jack Lowe did not confine his public activities to the Roads Board. He prominently associated himself with the Agricultural Society and other organisations striving to promote and accelerate the advancement of the district and to improve the lot of those residing in it. It is fitting that the son of one who showed the state and the Commonwealth something of the potentialities of the district should be chairman of the civic body, which pioneers the way for bitumen roads in the township and to provide other essentials to the well-ordered community and a domestic water supply. In January 1953, Jack Lowe was named in the Queen's New Year's Honours List for his services to local government in the Harvey district. So it says, Mr. Jack Lowe, OBE, has been one of the foremost advocates of irrigation in the southwest and has been a member of the Irrigation Commission since January 1935. For 19 years, he was chairman of the Harvey Road Board, and from 1935 to 1944 was chairman of the Southwest Road Board Association and is a member of the State Electricity Commission. In May 1954, mentions in a Western Australian paper that Mr. and Mrs. J. Lowe of Harvey left by the Orion on Monday for a 6-month holiday in England and on the continent. So it seems that Jack did very well for himself. Their fourth child, Leighton, was born in 1894 in Mildura. Leighton also enlisted in World War I, but was marked as an invalid in May 1916 due to pulmonary complications following measles that he contracted in the Black Boy Hill Army camp. He then joined again on the 19th of July 1921, however was not engaged in service. He married Edith Truder Rogers in Wellington, Western Australia on the 15th of December 1925, when he was 30 and Edith 24. In the Mildura Cultivator on the 10th of April 1918, it mentions, among recent visitors to Mildura has been Mr. Leighton Lowe of Isaac Lowe and Sons, Harvey, Western Australia. Dropping in at the office of his uncle, Mr. Mansfield, he greatly pleased me by chatting about the big government dam on the Harvey River. 3 years later, it announces there's a genuine clearing sale on the property at Harvey, and there's instructions delivered by Isaac Lowe and Sons, who are dissolving their partnership and are offering it at auction the whole of their livestock and plant. So at that point, the family decided to go their separate ways in business. And Leighton died in 1974 in Wellington, Western Australia at the age of 79. So a real pioneering family that seemed to have been very influential in the little town of Harvey in Western Australia back in the day, and such an unfortunate occurrence of having their eldest son die over at Gallipoli. But it seems that their father made amends of his mistake and supported his next 2 sons in their enlistment, with one luckily not having to go over to the war and the other one coming home safely.
If you are interested in sharing your story on my podcast, Family History Mysteries, please go to my Facebook page and send me a message. If you would like some assistance in filling in the gaps in your family tree to see what mysteries you solve, please get in touch. And don't forget, you can have early access to episodes by subscribing, and you'll also gain access to bonus episodes.